Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is DB333, and welcome back to Hearts Round 4, The New Order, Last Days of Europe as the United States of America. Now, in the last video, we started preparing for election season. We have Robert F. Kennedy running against John Glenn, both who in real life would have been excellent fucking presidents, and we really fucking dropped the ball in not electing those guys. But, it's head-to-head. Well, it's sort of head-to-head. If I had to guess. It's looking very good for Glenn right now because, let's see. Kennedy's been exposed as corrupt. Central East Coast is a big one we need to flip. We accidentally may or may not have gunned down a bunch of innocent protesters because we were taking away their First Amendment rights. Granted, they were probably part of a Klan, but still, I mean, it's not a good sight. Governor John Glenn and President Robert Kennedy were all smiles before the cameras, shaking each other's hands warmly before turning to the podiums. The unlikely astronaut leader of the RDs and the patrician-turned-prodigal son of the NPP faced each other on a stage, sharpening their verbal knives to draw blood from slight difference on their dreams of a brighter future. Governor Glenn, your reputation as America's first astronaut precedes you in politics, Kennedy smiled, but without a hint of warmth in his eyes. But the American people today look for solutions for the problems here, on Earth. Poverty, discrimination, education. We deserve a more perfect union here at home, rather than escaping the stars. Glenn bristled at Kennedy's comments. I assure you, President Kennedy, that our platform is far more than just a return to space. But if you insist on questioning the value of America's space program, I can point to every school child who came up to me in the years following Gemini, asking if they too can bring America to the stars, to ask themselves, to dream of the promise of America and its potential. And dreams motivate us far more than despair. The voters side with Glenn. We'll see how our campaigns do so far. Mediocre, good, terrible. Serbia sides with Italy, okay. Operational success, we gained some political power, which is very nice. Nagasaki Accord signed, bringing peace to Vietnam. Good for them. I'm happy for them. A good RD campaign. Excellent. Right. So we're doing some UBI right now. So we'll see how that ends up helping people out. And then I'm thinking next, we want to go on to Tokyo. Because at this point, it'll be too late for it to help RFK out. Mistakes were made. Shit. Yeah, it'll be too late for it to affect the election, but the Japanese may be imperialist, but brutal devils who have gripped Hawaii in our West Coast ports in their claws for some 20-odd years, but we will still give them a chance at negotiating before we wipe the floor with them. Their ICBMs are in range of most American states, and many at the Pentagon and White House are worried that should the conflict escalate into nuclear exchange, it could prove costly. Even if American missiles are inferior copies of America's, and to a lesser extent Germany's quality designs, some of them might actually hit close to their targets, and with atomic weapons, accuracy is not the biggest concern. A peaceful withdrawal of Japanese garrisons would soothe our righteous wrath, for a little while anyways. There wasn't a whole lot of fanfare when President Kennedy signed the executive order, and even less when the first 1,000 letters and the 200 checks inside were sent out by the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare to families in 13 states and 68 communities across the nation. The instructions on the letter were simple. For next year, you'll be receiving the same amount of money every month. There's no catch, no requirements, no stipulation on how you may spend the money, bills, clothes, housing, or just saving it. All was fine. And the best of all, it would be tax-free. The important thing was to keep track of what you did spend it on. At the end of every month, there would receive a phone call, an envelope with a short questionnaire to fill in, to be mailed back. Soon the rumors began to spread that the government was just giving money to random people, which quickly began to work its way back through the political grapevine. Soon the citizen basic income experiment was exposed by the Washington Post. The president has defended the program in the White House press conference, stating that the goal of the citizen basic income was to provide a baseline guarantee that would help the poorest Americans make ends meet. And that was just a year-long trial to see the results. The opposition has come from two sides, those in Democrats and the far-right NPP, who denounced the government handouts to random people, which would be incredibly expensive, especially in light of all other social security programs Bobby has been pushing. But there's some in the CNPP and LPP who say that RFK hasn't gone far enough. He should be paying even more money to more people for longer. Facing backlash, he has to respond quickly. We'll boost payments to $50 a month and let the test continue. Damn, our poverty rate is going up like crazy. Got no checks. We'll go ahead and do. Is there a? Oh, I gotta check. Decision console commands. Decision no check. Console commands. Stop cookie time. I don't care. And I don't think we'll have enough time to finish up these, but decision no checks. There we are. I think it looks good for us. I think the debate still has yet to factor in. And then when it will, polls are updated. It'll look better. Tilts. Oh, let me close out. Reopen. Why does it do it better for the NPP? Why? Okay, we'll have the Great Lakes. Southwest we got. Upper South we have. We might get California. California better not let me down, okay? The airwaves were filled with cheers and applause from inmates of Folsom Prison today. Johnny Cash's new live album, At Folsom Prison, hit the shelves. The album was recorded live at a concert Cash performed at Folsom State Prison, California. It's a runaway success. The album sold out at record stores across the nation, and Folsom State Blues has shot up to #1 on the Billboard's Top 40. Johnny Cash shed much of his former outlaw image after getting help for his amphetamine addiction in 1967, but was not giving up his compassion for incarcerated Americans and his advocacy for their rights. Cash had several meetings with former President Nixon in the early 60s about president reform and expressed interest in meeting with President Kennedy as well. The album's lyrics reflect the harsh and alienating conditions of prison life and the yearning of prisoners to break free and return to their loved ones. The album may have reinvigorated Cash's previously ailing career, and Columbia Records has suggested that a future live album might be recorded at San Quentin State Prison. What the future may hold for the Man in Black, this album has clearly captivated the hearts and minds of nations for years to come. How's a man go to prison in California for murder in Nevada anyway? Okay. Actually, this doesn't even matter. We might as well just do that. We'll do support weapons. The Stonewall Inn is a spot of light and loud laughter in a world slipping into autumn. The sounds of occasional retching aside, the inn is a good place, and the crowds know it to be far more than just a building. For many of its patrons, it's the only place they can truly be themselves, but autumn is sweeping in one chill breeze at a time. The signs have been there for a long while. The mayor's riding on the coattails of a moral cleanup movement sweeping the country, and the officers sent to do the collection duties. One calls it the offering bag, with only a hint of irony. From the inn tells the bartenders of the anti-mafia team they're forming in the back of the Metropolitan Department. It's not like the cops they've formed here hasn't known the wrath of the cops. Community they've formed here hasn't known the wrath of the cops, but this time it'll be different. Change is coming to America, as the president says over the airwaves, but some changes are less welcome than others. The bartender methodically cleans up his cups half an hour before closing time. He'll take care of the mess in the toilets afterwards, and there's always a mess in the toilets. He got hired by the Don, same as the other staff, but he's come to love the place. The patrons are God and have a glint in their eyes, but it's a real life they're living here in the damp spaces. He looks at the sleeping customer or hunch over his shoulders and smiles wanly. Whatever happens, he'll stay with Shep, even if the hole's leaking. His passengers deserve nothing less. Hope glows as the day glows dim. Will this be enough to finish? Okay, fuck. Fuck, California. Yes! Oh! Fuck you, California! Fuck you, New York! New Hampshire! You bloody quit. I can't say that. That's not going to be okay in a couple of years. After months of politicking, the people spoken, everyone be quiet. I can't hear the TV. Oh, thank you, Texas. I love you so much. More than a year of announcements, debates, speeches, and rallies have come to an end on November 5th, 1968, with Election Day. Millions of Americans have lined up at school gymnasiums, libraries, civil centers, and fire stations across the nation to fulfill their civic and democratic duty. This year marks the 46 quadrennial presidential elections, but there will also be 21 state gubernatorial elections to decide state governors, 34 Senate seats, and all 435 seats in the House of Reps, and many local and state elections for mayors, councilors, sheriffs, and judges all across the nation. However, the presidential elections, what everyone's closing into TV and radio to learn about as the polls are close. As the night goes on, the votes are counted and reported. Soon it's become clear who will be sitting in the White House for the next 4 years. President-elect Glenn. Glenn! Glenn! The treaty port negotiations. On to Tokyo. Well, we'll focus on the children. America's future fortunes are intertwined with that of its children today. Their success is our country's success. Their failings are our country's failings. And the strength and longevity of America's society and American values rely on its pillars, and well-fed, taught, and well-adjusted children will surely become pillars of the mighty stone. Our children's future foretells America's future. Therefore, it is the government's policy to create an environment which they can blossom to their fullest potential. And education reform is an integral component of the MPP's agenda. Plans are being drawn for nationwide programs aimed at increasing both the children enrolled in our schools and the quality education we receive. America shall not leave its children behind, and President Kennedy pledges to make that boast a reality. So let me look at the Senate. Actually, let me look. The center has actually held out very well. I'm impressed. Wisconsin has some more Republicans. Republicans lost 2 seats. The far right lost 2 seats. Democrat picked up 4. Republican in New Hampshire now, interesting enough. Alabama has an NPP center guy. Holy shit. Strom Thurmond is still here. Oh my god, Alabama. Oh. That's kind of based, I'm not going to lie. Good for you, Alabama. Hey, I mean, we got Glenn, boys. That's all I was worried about. 27. 8 of the NPP isn't on board with us. Okay, 16, 8, that's 35. We'll talk with Republicans a little bit, try to get a bit more compromise going. And then we can do the fight for schools and the fight for workers, depending on what we want to do. How's our economy looking? We're getting a deficit now, finally. A little bit of one. So we'll cut civilian spending, increase our liquid reserves, pump that into the economy. And onwards to Tokyo. The assembled cabinet was silent, digesting the contents of the room of the proposal before them. President Kennedy surveyed the room, knowing the enormity of the moment it was being given. It's been 20 years since the end of the war, gentlemen, President Kennedy said. A decade or so since Eisenhower tore up the Akagi Accords and made Hawaii into the Union. Now it's our turn to finish what he started. The proposal to stand up to Japan, at last, to demand negotiation over the treaty ports of San Francisco and Los Angeles would be the most ambitious and consequential diplomatic initiative by the United States in their lifetimes. The eyes of the world and of the American electorate would be scrutinizing them under a microscope. There would be no room for failure. The Japanese wouldn't simply fold, but it was clear that holding ports halfway around the world, a diplomatic nightmare and impossible to secure, were increasingly unattractive. How much could America push without being pushed aside by Japan in return? It would take the political power of American government to ensure the successful return of the ports, but without giving away the house to the Japanese in the process. But a few concessions here. There might be useful in making further demands further down the line. Let's make history, gentlemen. So I'm going to save right here. Because we have Glenn. Now if we can get the ports back, and if we can get Hawaii back, that's all I really want right now. Scoop Jackson has been meeting with Republican senators throughout the sprawling Senate office building, most of them individually in the attempt to get enough votes to pass the Federal Student Aid Act. In fact, Scoop has been surprised about how receptive the idea of additional education funding is with his colleagues from the other side of the aisle. After all, there's nothing more popular than a politician seeking re-election than to point to a new school in their district or the improved test scores to show that, yes, they are doing their job. But, like usual, there are some concerns with the law that has been written. For one thing, some senators have expressed concerns about how the federal mandates would strip the states of their prerogatives to manage education, which would be increasingly popular in some states, especially in the South and West. Other senators were a bit easy on the cost of FSA, which will tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into the budget. Well, again, they like the idea of supporting education. They also don't want to sell the same children with even more debt when they become taxpayers. Having taken their wards into account, Scoop has approached the committee writing this bill and made a suggestion. To accept this compromise, we have 3 new support from Republicans. I think we're about to rewrite it, reduce the cost, and give the states more say. President Robert F. Kennedy, the Secretary of State, read through the diplomatic message that arrived from the Japanese embassy again. They want to meet on one of the carriers in San Francisco Bay, huh? President Kennedy laughed scornfully. I thought we already did that on the Akagi. At least it's close to home. We'll have an easier time securing the message and from Washington if we're in San Francisco anyway. The Secretary of State muled over notes contents, though we can't rule out the risk of bugs on the carrier, and I'm not sure the Japanese would take kindly to the suggestion. We'd still be doing them a favor, meeting them on a ship like their ship like this. Any other options? Well, we could suggest we come to one of our carriers. The voters would love the imagery, the Secretary of State suggested, though I'm sure the Japanese PM would be having the same concerns as well. But two fell silent for a second. Maybe we should just ask him if he'll be alright with Mexico City. Let's propose Mexico City as a neutral grounds. First, education has been a long issue since the beginning of America, with local school districts maintaining schools and the states providing some direction. However, this meant that there are wide disparities based on wealth and state mandates, meaning that many students are not receiving the full education they need for the future. Federal Student Aid Act will fix this by providing resources to students in districts if they desperately need it, and a baseline standard of education across the U.S. So, we're doing well with that. The RDs have a good majority going for them. In August 1945, Harry Truman signed the HoI Accords, which ended the Pacific War in a humiliating defeat for the U.S. The Americans were forced to surrender Hawaii and all other Pacific possessions to Japan, who also signed perpetual leases on the ports of L.A. and San Francisco. However, in 1960, President Eisenhower tore up the HoI Accords and resumed a total embargo against the Japanese Empire, leading to a tense international standoff, which culminated in the Hawaii Missile Crisis. Recent diplomatic overtures have caused tensions to thaw and opened up the path for the negotiation of Honolulu Accords, a new settlement to the question of trade and sovereignty in the Pacific. America seeks to reclaim the treaty ports, while America desires a resumption of a crucial oil trade with America. The outcome of talks will be determined by the political efforts both sides invest into gaining the upper hand in the negotiations, and the talks could go in very interesting directions, should the negotiators think outside the box. We're currently discussing the meeting for location. Japan is still in the lead. I think Mexico City's a nice compromise, right? The Japanese just sent over their agreement on location. We're good to go for a summit. A momentary look of relief emerged on the Secretary of State before swiftly disappearing. Now comes a hot pot, President RFK said. We better get ready for what the Japanese are going to want in exchange for giving our territory back. They want our oil, and they want access to our markets, the Secretary said, slid forward on President X. With everything that's been going on with Spear, I can't say I blame him. President Kennedy smiled. And that gives us leverage. Making history, one step at a time. Oh, shit. Mr. President, we have started our negotiations with the Empire of Japan about the potential acquiescence of our California ports. One of the big problems between our nation and the co-prosperity spirit is that the fact that we do not trade enough. Because of this, the Japanese have demanded a substantial amount of oil to make up for this recent shortage. Simply put, the Spear lacks many of the oil reserves that we have here in the U.S. Luckily, the Japanese diplomat seems pretty desperate to sign a contract with us. If we grant them subsidized oil purchases, the economy of the Spear will continue functioning and we may regain our lost ports. We help out the Japanese and the Spear helps us out. We can also see a bright relationship between our two great nations. We also have a chance of bringing American workers back to work for us. Now, the question of the moment is, how much oil will we give to the Empire of Japan? We could be generous and offer them the substantial amount of oil we need. We could go down the middle and offer them a moderate amount of oil. Finally, we could give them a small amount of oil, but they might not accept the offer. We also need to consider what the Japanese plan to use oil for. Well, what do you say, Mr. President? Let's go ahead. Do we want to fight for schools or workers? Fuck, we need more in our reserves. It's a monthly thing, right? Yeah, there it is. Alright, we'll fight for workers. Give them as much oil as we can. Many have noted an increase in diplomatic activity between Japan and the United States the past weeks. Today, speculation on the cause of the uptick was put to rest as the countries announced a high-level diplomatic summit to address the situation in the Pacific. The state objectives of the summit is for Japan to secure access to American petroleum, for the USA to secure the return of treaty ports, and for both countries, with their respective alliances, to lift their mutual embargoes and resume trade. Great hopes are already being pinned for the potential effects of a treaty for the countries' respective economies and for the wider cause of peace in the Pacific and the world. All eyes will be on the summit as we try to navigate the maze of a competing interests to find common cause for a deal. Can the Pacific live up to its name? The trade deal between the U.S. and the Empire of Japan is finally being finalized after days of proposals and communications. Seems like both of the parties are getting the resources they really need. The U.S. will have its ports in San Francisco and Los Angeles returned without conflict, and the Empire of Japan will be given an oil grant that will help solve the widespread shortage out of the Spear. The President and Prime Minister of the United States and Japan respectively both shook hands on the deal just moments ago. No matter what, both parties hope that the negotiations will work better between the two global superpowers. Workers both in California and Japanese home isles rejoiced as the nation announced the completion of a deal. The trade deal was still complete, but diplomats from the United States and Japan still have work to do. Talks are supposed to carry on the next few days, but one thing is sure, there will be a peaceful end to these important negotiations. They worked. Senate elections are in. Polls have been updated. Good job, America. You done good, son. You done good. America's decided. Victory speech and the party of a winner has taken place, as did the most somber concession speech of a defeated candidate. The last of the ballots has been counted and certified, and the election of 1968 is over. The resident of the White House has been determined for the next 4 years, and that of Congress for the next 2. There's still the meeting of the Electoral College in December, and then the inauguration on January 20th to make everything official for history books. For many people, the new presidency will begin now. If re-elected, the current president will just carry on with his regular duties. But if a new president has been selected, then the lame duck will hold the fort, issue his pardons, work for the president-elect, ensure the smooth train for power is smooth and uneventful, and maybe begin planning his life after ascending to the highest office in American politics. Hail to the chief, whoever it may be. The Japanese representatives have laid down their terms to restart trade between our respective spheres. They have suggested a mutual end to the embargo, with no condition on the trade to follow. Our negotiators are asking what our response will be. Our industry advisors are asking us to accept immediately, accessing the vast materials in Japan, China, and India, and raw materials from the rest of spheres too big a prize to risk by adding clauses and conditions on the treaty. Some more hawkish negotiators, however, suggest that we should push for more. We say the conditions of trade in the sphere is set up to favor Japan, and we should ensure a deal that puts us on more equal footing. To accomplish this, they suggest that we attach more clauses on mutual tariff reductions to the treaty, applied in the areas most beneficial to us, of course. I think lifting the embargo is our objective. We are in the lead. Japanese negotiators have responded to our demands for tariff reductions to accompany an end to embargo. The response is not what we hoped. Labor suggested as a naked grab for favorable conditions, they've rejected them out of hand and restated their previous offer. A mutual end to the embargoes and a resumption to trade on existing terms. Our choice is between accepting this as best we can or just move on with negotiations without an agreement on the matter. It was worth a shot, we'll move on. We're still in the lead, it seems. It appears an end is in sight for the trade embargo between the world's greatest economies. Lead negotiators for the ongoing summit between Japan and the U.S. have made an announcement this morning that a trade deal will resume trade today between their countries has been agreed in principle to be signed later today. On both sides of the Pacific, great hopes are being placed on the economic benefits of the deal, and businesses are scrambling to take advantage of the new goods and markets on offer. It seems the world is one step closer to thawing relationships and relations between the U.S. and Japan. Let the goods flow across the Pacific. Yeah. Clause number 3. President Robert Kennedy is surrounded by the students and teachers at Strong John Thompson University Elementary School in Washington, D.C., just a few blocks away from the White House, is signing the Federal Student Act to applaud as news cameras and photographers record the events for posterity. Today we say that all the mixed students deserve the chance to learn and grow, to become the well-informed, smart, and intelligent adults tomorrow that will make America better than ever. The doctors, teachers, and artists, inventors, and leaders of tomorrow in our schools today. And we must do all we can today to make tomorrow even better. The FSA Act will set up a new baseline standard for primary and secondary schools in America in mathematics, English, history, science, civics, and more. The federal government will provide money to states and school boards that, due to financial reasons, are unable to raise their schools to a new standard in hiring teachers and expanding classrooms to promote equality of education across the nation. Other aspects of the law include funding for newer and safer school buses, penalties for school districts that have failed to integrate their schools, and establishing a nonpartisan committee to standardize textbooks across the nation. With education groups and civil rights organizations are already pleased with the FSA and their equality and standardization edicts, many states' rights reformers are angry at the law, which is pretty much stripping the local control over education, which has long been one of the most important roles of a state. While most of the articles of law are only for those school districts that require the funds and are opt-in, the need for money in many of the poorest states will force them to compromise on their beliefs in order to make the money they need to operate. Nevertheless, the FSA will still make America one of the best educated nations in the world. An apple for every teacher, a chalkboard for every student. Beautiful. Let's see how the education is going up. Not bad, actually. It's pretty good. poverty is going up at going down, technically, at a beautiful rate. I think we only have one thing left to do. Economic Opportunity Act. You know, I'll do, this is a little cheap, and I apologize for that, but focus. We'll do the Spectre Hunger. What good is owning the richest farmland in the world do if you cannot feed your people with it? Despite having more food than the world has people, America still shuffles around sidewalks, clutching at their stomachs. Americans in our cities and towns still loiter around diners, malls, and restaurants, begging for scraps of leftovers and hoping for good Samaritans to come their way. This is a stark, naked truth. America's bounty is locked behind a rich man's window pane, and its penniless can only stare at the sustenance denied to them from the house outside. Progress for America means progress for all of its citizens, and most vulnerable most of all. We must lift them up to a better lot in life, by any means necessary, but before anything else, we must approach them with our good intentions. If nothing else, we must know that no American will ever go hungry if President Kennedy gets his way. And we'll do some community action. Successfully implementing local laws requires the will for participation of local communities and leading figures. Their importance to the lasting effect of the president's reforms cannot be understated. In fact, the results of many of his programs suborns itself to the extent at which a community enforces them. Those who will look favorably at President Kennedy's policies will not hesitate to follow both their letter and extent. Conversely, those who will play every trick in the book to keep from enforcing even the former. Securing their loyalties become easier when they voluntarily offer their support. For this outcome, Kennedy intends to dress for inhabitants, whether in person or through broadcast. His opponents raise comparisons to door-to-door salesmen, but if it's working, then why bother complaining? Okay. Autocomplete. The war against poverty, the fight for basic human rights and decency, is one that my administration has done its utmost to fight. We have pushed for many reforms and expansions on the welfare state to cover as many Americans as we can, to create a baseline, a safety net, to catch those that fall and need our help. However, this is not just the job of the government to facilitate. This is the work of the whole nation. Every one of us needs to pitch in to help the underprivileged and poor, the sick and broken, so that everyone can reach their full potential. For only then will the Americans in all 50 states, in every community, great and small, help their neighbors, friends, and family, we can finally defeat the disease and scourge of poverty that has plagued humanity for thousands of years. So I call on all Americans, from New York to San Francisco, from Minneapolis to Houston, and all the points in between. Your communities need you. Volunteers and donations are needed from an innumerable number of organizations in tackling everything from school lunches to adult literacy to homeless shelters. Donating your time or your money or both is a great way to tell your community, we will not leave you behind. We will help you. We will keep you warm, fed, and safe. The applause as Bobby Kennedy finishes his speech is deafening as he waves to a crowd and shows off his famous smile. Statistics already show that the poverty rate in America is decreasing with a boost to welfare, support for medical services, and the improvement of labor rights. For cheering atop the NPP, which is famous for not agreeing on anything, somehow has all come together to support the president's work. All in all, a job well done. We'll leave a nation a better place than when we found it. We'll go ahead and do the Economic Opportunity Act. With Congress convinced and the American people appeased, there is no better time to hold the culmination of our work, money, and time to vote. The Economic Opportunity Bill is one of several proposals comprising what history will consider the most comprehensive piece of economic reform introduced to the capital since the New Deal era. From large school grants to a nationwide vocational training program, federal food charities to cheap houses, it is a panoply of measures both guaranteeing and experimental with the intent of tackling and hopefully reducing the specter of American poverty. The war on poverty may not even end in our generation or our children's generation, or their children's, but we will sound its death knell with the bill enshrined, announced to the world that its days are numbered. In 100 years or 1,000, the American people will celebrate a mission accomplished, take pride for having laid the foundation of her triumph, even if we won't be around in office to see it. Good working on advanced artillery now, because I don't know what else we can even do. 27, 31. We'll do, just for the heck of it, work with the Republicans. Yeah, there we go. It's time to move on to the third and last issue, the treaty ports. It's obvious to everyone that no real rapprochement between our nations is possible while the Japanese occupy part of the American mainland, with all the threats that imply, and the Japanese have indicated their willingness to return the ports. Specifics of a transfer has been left to the end of a negotiation. This will be last clause up for discussion. We have a few options on how we will position ourselves to approach these final negotiations. Our advisors fear that a straightforward transfer will be perceived in Japan as a loss of face, and that the politics of that perception might jeopardize the negotiations. To avoid this, we say what we would offer to demilitarize the ports upon transfer. By doing this, we will ensure the Japanese have something they can point to as getting in return, enabling them to transfer the ports without appearing weak. Others in our administration counsel a tougher approach. The goal of the whole summit, they say, is to turn a page on our relations with Japan, and that can only be accomplished if they agree not to the port transfer, but to demilitarize Hawaii. With the Hawaiian Missile Crisis, in all too recent memory, they claim the asymmetry of mutual threats will soon cause a rise in tension back to the previous levels as long as the Japanese garrison the island chain. Our most hawkish counsel suggests that we can demand demilitarization of Hawaii without offering to militarize the ports in return. According to them, it's the only solution the man of the streets will accept, and thus the only way to prevent further resentment from scouring relations. What should we approach? Free ports and demilitarized islands, I think, will secure relations. Our request for the demilitarization of Hawaii has apparently not been well received in the Japanese camp, flatly refusing to consider the merits of our proposal. They say port transfer is the only issue up for discussion. Demilitarization is only a part of its talks, as a condition for port transfer, they say, and they insist equally firmly on the condition and the complete impossibility of reciprocation. The Hawaiian Missile Crisis, they remind us, was caused by American recalcitrance and our internal failures for driving foreign policy decisions. And the onus is entirely on the USA to prevent a repeat of events. Many in our administration point out that this arrogance is typical of the Japanese in their dealings with us. Discussions are completed on the clause that matters to Japanese, so they've reverted to their attitude of victorious conquerors, dictating demands to a vanquished foe. If we accept for diktats, they say, we'll set up for them to continue their arrogant disregard for our interests and our future dealings with them. On the other hand, the success of the summit hinges on us finding some way to accommodate both nations here, and we may need to give this to them to prevent the negotiations from unraveling entirely. However, we reply that there will be no room for further negotiation on the issue. What do we say? Okay, I'll save again. I'll see if we can't insist on a civilian Hawaii. Anti-tank. Beautiful. Get that upgrading. Alright, shit. If you guys want to do it like that, we'll do it like that. Hello? Load game. Okay, only the ports will be demilitarized. How about that? After several long days and nights spent in negotiations, our delegations delighted to inform us that they have reached a comprehensive agreement with their Japanese counterparts. So we toast our success. Our brightest policy experts are poring over the proposed clause, perfecting wording, ensuring consistency between the English and Japanese translations. Soon will become time to sign, and not long after, we hope, we will finally have our territory back. Our success on this clause bodes well for the outcome of the whole summit. One step closer to comprehensive treaty. We're getting the ports back. The announcement of a comprehensive treaty between the USA and Japan has been greeted with optimism in most of the country. Through the last week, as the speeches were held and papers signed, the promise of a more peaceful future seemed to last reality, and a profound sigh of relief has passed over the nation. Tension that has been felt by our people for over 20 years has finally been losing its grip. Today, at the treaty ports in LA and San Francisco passed back to American hands, the atmosphere shifted to one of celebration. Across the country, everyday life has given way to port parties, pulling whole neighborhoods out into the streets in celebration. The big crowds of all have been seen in the treaty's port cities themselves. In San Francisco, cheers from the gathered throngs drowned out the voices of a Japanese ambassador and his translator as the last Japanese flag was taken down and the stars and stripes hoisted in its place. Surprise was evident among the Japanese as well. Sailors above Shikuma found themselves cheered goodbye by the jubilant crowds. The scowls and jeers they had been come to expect from the Americans were replaced by cheerful smiles and waves. Pictures of uniformed Japanese smiling and waving back to the crowds are now making the rounds on television on both sides of the Pacific. Truly, it feels like a page has been turned on U.S.-Japanese relations. We replaced the American Malay with a ray of hope. We got our ports back. They're demilitarized zones now, but hey, they're going to get some oil, and we will have one more proposition. Now, this is probably the most finicky one to get down. And this might take a few reloads to get, because I've done this a couple times already. Our success in the port transfer negotiations and the ease with which we reached an agreement has led to a markedly friendlier tone at the summit. Our delegation has remarked on the surprising willingness on the side of Japan to discuss territorial revisions and find a compromise in the East Pacific. Together, this provides us with an opportunity too good to pass up. With most of a treaty safely agreed upon, it's time to open discussion on one last question: the return of Hawaii. In order to get them to even consider the transfer, we must prepare to give important concessions in return. Our administration believes they might ask for a joint or neutral administration into the Panama Canal, extensive arms limitation concessions, or both. Regardless, it might be a price we should be willing to pay. Securing Hawaii would be a fantastic achievement for our government and an end for USA. But beyond that, it would cement the treaty as an end to the era of hostility between us and the Japanese. The last core U.S. territory still occupied by Japan. Its return will mark a true end to the war in the minds of the public and help usher a time of peace in the East Pacific. Submit the proposal. We have a few days to finish up this bill, and then we'll have Glenn. Not days after the riotous celebrations in LA and San Francisco, the foreign minister returned to D.C. under President Kennedy's personal invitation. The visit's official intent was a tour around American capital, a show of goodwill capitalizing the momentum of a now-named handover success. Unofficially, the old man had his suspicions. He thought them confirmed when he entered the Oval Office and saw the president backs turned, investigating a large canvas map of Hawaii. The minister drew in a sharp breath as he took his seat, sealing himself for the last conversation he ever wished to confront in his career. I trust the accommodations were to your liking, President Kennedy asked without glancing. The foreign minister grunted in assent. Not exactly proper decorum, but he figured the silence meant the president didn't care. Good. Leather shoes clacked with polished linoleum as the president shuffled back to the resolute desk, putting several folders out of its cabinet. He spread the stack across the surface like a dealer with its stack of cards. Each folder bore a proposal in red capital letters across their tab. Wouldn't want to keep you from seeing the site, so I'll keep this brief. We've some ideas for your government's consideration. We'll discuss these more during your stay. As quickly as he arrived, the minister left the office, escorted by his assisted guide. When he eventually inspected the president's ideas in print form, he was drawn most into demilitarized zones in both Hawaii and the Panama Canal. We're going back. We're going back, boys. Strange game. The only winning move is not to play. Usually they at least like ask, hey, can we take Panama instead? Or they give it to you right off the bat. End of an era. Next we'll go ahead and move on to what do we want to research? Can we do artillery? Where are we doing artillery, right? How about civilian construction? I don't know. Why not? We'll submit the proposal. Do some shipments to the Central Siberian Republic. Alright, let's I'll save here so I don't have to go that much further back. We'll do measured negotiations. Try that out. Jesus, come on, guys. Any second now. Come on. We'll try this again. What the fuck? We'll keep trying real quick. We're keeping Hawaii. Measure negotiations? That sounds nice, right? Huh. Okay, let me try tagging over tag chap. Oh god, yeah. Alright, tag USA. We'll let a little bit of time tick for. See if we can't. Okay, we'll slow it down. when do they usually... Okay, so we get the 14th, it seems. I'm wondering if we did something wrong here. We'll try the hardline option real quick. Oh, okay, here we go. Next obstacle the conference would hurdle was how violations would be addressed. The Japanese delegation emphasized that all parties are bound by the agreement's terms, ensuring such requires appropriate retribution in the event that either party, irrespective of reason, fails to uphold said terms. Laws are toothless without punishment, said the Japanese foreign minister, and only sharp teeth suffice for treaties between two nations that can end the world with a button. Our ambassador was split on the issue. On one hand, clearly defined punishment for violations within the proposed DMZs incentivized Japan from using them as de facto outposts for a Pacific-wide cordon sanitaire, provided, of course, the same penalties applied to them. Those disinclined to trust the Empire intentions argue that the punishment will be selective and aggressive, applied at our disfavor. Additionally, a minority opinion, stringent punishment will prevent us from justifying certain activities through creative interpretation of the agreement's terms. Further administrations may find themselves an option short should the need for action of a DMZ arises. But in the end, the American delegation approved disciplinary measures for violating the agreements. There we go. I think we might be able to finish it up here. Troops légionnaires d'Alger. Le baguette. Fuck off! What are you doing? Okay, we figured out. Well, huh. I'm not stopping until we get this fucking negotiation figured out. Da-da-da. Two days. Okay. The secretary's sight honed on the outstretched hand. Coarse, wrinkled, about his size at closer squint. Small band that flowed dull against fluorescent lamps, rung around its forefinger. Less ornaments than his own, and maybe several years more worn, but a wedding ring all the same. He glanced at the conference room, or what was a conference room, shredded and whole paper covered every inch of floorboard, topped by stray mug shards with drying pools of coffee and the stray blood smear. Its occupants fared little better. Either they were dozing off where they stood or sat, or laid, wincing at cuts and bruises covered in flimsy gauze pads. Or both. 24 hours straight of wheeling and dealing a tree had taken its toll. No doubt the Japanese were eager to leave with what they had. At least they'll enjoy sleeping in cushions and for more than a few hours on a flight home. Can he say the same for his? That they were satisfied with what he had. Will his countrymen approve what he'd wrangled from the Empire when all is said and done, or they will both dig their heels and ask for more? The secretary then turned to the man with the outstretched hand, opposite his side at a long table. Stodgy with a bald spot, purple bags for eyes, a rotund belly protruding from an unbuttoned suit. He might as well have been a middle-aged salaryman coming home from overtime rather than the Empire's premier representative abroad. Yet his tired smile and open palm seemed to offer a hope just as mundane, peace from across the aisle. The first in a long time, nodding to himself as Secretary of State, clasped the hand of his own and shook. Alright, we have this done. Alfred Lincoln was used to the cold, but never the kitchen. As the wind rushed in front of Lincoln, Michigan, at the soup kitchen on Lake Paulina Street, chilling him to his bones, he cusped the bowl delicately as he turned into the shelter, not wanting to waste a single drop before he could guzzle down. He didn't make eye contact with the young woman who handed him the bowl. She was younger than the usual crowd manning the soup line, which sometimes looked at Alfred with a mixture of disdain and self-importance. Charity, they called it, and while Alfred was grateful to have a square meal on a day on freezing streets, he preferred it if it didn't come to with a side of pitying condescension. "You forgot this." A tug on his elbow brought Alfred back to his senses. The young woman from the line pushed a bundle of crackers, an apple, and a few sachets of powder stamped with vitamin supplements, American Economic Opportunity Commission, on the side. "For the soup. You won't catch a cold or a flu with that." "Thanks." Refusing to pick up the vitamins. "Don't you have things to be doing?" The lady blinked, but never broke eye contact with Alfred before replying, "It's the right thing to do." Can we get that of... The Pacific Ocean was hardly Pacific, even before the Second World War. Great powers had offered at least a stick of kindling to the hard fires below the large cauldron, stoking its waters to even simmer, not too hot that its riches cannot be plummeted, nor too mild that all may freely sate the great greed with them. This delicate, almost gentlemanly balance was shattered when the world bared witness to boiling seas and a sunset stronger than the daylight sun. As mushroom clouds ended one age and announced the next, many feared the Pacific would forever stay between twilight and Armageddon, kept in place by two ambitions greater than the expanse which they both contested. Such fears were laid to rest today by a pair of disheveled ambassadors, all but bracing each other's enervated weights as they hobbled out of a hotel lobby. Against camera flashes and microphones, a hand each lifted each paper bearing two signatures from the governments of two great nations. Murmured speculations diffused through the gathered press before the weary Secretary of State pried open the foreign minister's sake bottle with bare teeth, drawed half its vigor, and let loose an empathetic, prophetic cry. "Peace in our times." 150 political power, replacing a ray of hope with daring to dream. Atsuto changes to Japan Islands. We become the owners of Hawaii Ishoto. Owners of Atsuto, Hawaii Shoto changes its name to Hawaii, and Tokoshi is renamed to Honolulu. And ladies and gentlemen, John Glenn figured his heart had never beaten so fast or so hard in his life, as the heavy staccato rhythm threatened to pop out of his chest. In 46 years of life, he'd been blessed with many momentous occasions, flying his first combat mission over the Marshall Islands, careening towards the stars on Friendship 7, even quitting NASA after Nixon cut its funding. However, all those life-changing events seemed trivial, as a host of his countrymen stared in admiration as he slipped his hands off that pristine little Bible, which he swore on the oath of office. Now, millions keenly watched him, standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial, to hear his first words that would define the fate of his country, and possibly of all mankind. Today, we as a nation are brought together, not to celebrate the victory of a man, but of a movement and an idea. We celebrate the idea that our homeland is indeed a great society, one unsullied by war, to autocracy or depression. We celebrate and reaffirm the dedication to freedom, democracy, and the self-determination of all peoples. To make our celebrated ideals into appreciated ones, we must begin anew as a people, such as the world begins anew with the changing of the age and the passing of the generational torch. This new page of human history has brought with it innovations and yet more uncertainties. From these innovations have spawned both terrors and wonders, some of which with the potential to save mankind, and yet others with the capacity to destroy it. To truly be a great and freedom-loving society, we must not appreciate those creations of man that implant a balance of terror upon the whole of a species. Rather, we should celebrate and develop those creations which may yet bring us to the depths of the ocean or the distant light of the stars. President Glenn stood slightly taller as tens of thousands of once dreary, blank faces erupted into smiles and cheers and applause. Through 149 combat missions, 3 trips to space, 2 governorships of Ohio, and a presidential election, he had followed the tides and turns of his life in his country. Now it seemed his solemn, God-given duty to let his country follow him. Ex nihilo ad astra. This is a beautiful place to cut it off, ladies and gentlemen. Holy shit. Talk about suspenseful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you want to see more of this content in the future, go ahead and hit the subscribe button for more uploads every weekday, as well as every Saturday. If you have any comments, feedback, concern, anything of the sort, leave it in the comment section below. I read all the comments I get and appreciate any all feedback you kind of would have for me. If you want to send a few bucks my way, I have a Patreon, down link below. If you want to share play games, I have a Discord. And if you want to see me do sort of stuff live, I have a Twitch. All those are down link below. Thank you as always for watching, ladies and gentlemen. My name has been DB333. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.